I'm Jessica Webb, and I'm here with Jim Whelan, the founder and executive director of the Gambling Clinic at the University of Memphis, and a recognized expert on the treatment of problem gambling. Jim, gambling has become so much more common in recent years, and people have a lot of questions about gambling and gambling problems. To begin, could you define gambling?
Operationally, we define gambling as when you place something of value, almost always money, but it could be other things, but you place something of value on an event where the outcome is at least partially determined by chance. When you're gambling is when you're giving that money and you don't know really what's going to happen and what the outcomes. You may hope, you may dream, you may think, but you don't really know.
There are a lot of forms of gambling now. Traditional forms like casino gambling, horse races, lottery tickets, but so many more forms now.
There really is, and it's interesting, spending this time, I've read this whole history of gambling, and that's the way it's always been, and for me, as someone who researches in the area, I keep on thinking, like, "All right, now I know the landscape," and the next thing I know, the landscape changes and something else happens, and new forms of gambling are apparent and oftentimes confusing to people. Is this really gambling or is it not? So we've moved generationally. I mean, it seems like every decade or so, we're opening the door to new forms. The most recent ones we've seen is sports betting, which, while it always has existed within our culture, the legalization of it changed everything. And now, more recently, there's this whole prediction markets, which is based on the futures investments, but it's a variation of it that is, in some ways, not regulated the way lots of gambling are. So we keep on seeing new forms. And as a researcher in the area, I kept on thinking, okay, we're saturated now. This is it. This is what we're dealing with. And then a couple of years go by, and yet again, there's this another opportunity for people to gamble and sometimes not realize they're gambling when they're doing it.
Can you explain what defines a gambling problem?
So gambling problems are about when people are experiencing negative consequences because of their gambling behavior, that it has caused disruptions and problems in their life, that an occasional monetary problem all the way through major difficulties. When we talk about it at a more severe level, which we sometimes think of as a clinical problem, along with it a diagnosis of a gambling disorder, and that's when it fundamentally has the characteristics of it's something people continue to engage in. It causes them harm. And even though that harm is meaningful, real harm, they continue to engage in that behavior. And when that occurs, I'm describing it in a kind of mellow way, but the truth of the matter is it's a growing interference with people's lives, their relationships with others, their financial well-being, their personal safety.
What sort of harms do you see as a result of gambling disorder?
Yeah, so I think it's important here to understand that inherently gambling is not going to harm people. Okay, we take risks, and the majority of the people who do take those risks and place bets are not going to experience harm. They have a budget, or at least they have that data in mind. I can spend this discretionary money and have fun with it. So gambling can become harmful when its engagement in it causes some deterioration in either financially, interpersonally, or personally that begins to spiral and increase and like stack upon itself so that a person finds themselves stuck in their life where the gambling is a way of coping with their world. The gambling is a way of keeping them engaged in life, despite the fact, we talked about before, that it's hurting them and they're ignoring that pain. So the first thing that people see for themselves is the financial damage. That's the one thing that when people call us and ask for treatment is this realization of how much money they have lost over time, which is hard for us to do. It's hard. If you think about how much money did you spend in clothing for the last year? I mean, I kind of know what I bought, sort of, but I don't know what that is. Well, the same thing happens with gambling, particularly because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So that accumulation is the harm that's happening in the background, and suddenly people realize this is too much. I can't pay my bills. I'm struggling with getting through life. I don't have money to do other things I want to do. So that's the first one. The second one is you're harming relationships. Close relationships depend on trust. Partners, children in your life, family members, close friends, we all interact with this idea. I trust you, you trust me on this. But what's happening with gambling is that trust gets eroded because they're not seeing it, and then they discover it. They don't know if they can trust you. And once that trust erodes, now that social support pulls back. Now the reliability that you have in their lives pulls back. And in many cases, you're harming others.
Mhm. You mentioned the financial harm and the harmed relationships that people may experience as a result of problem gambling. What other harms might people experience as a result of problem gambling?
Well, as those two very overt things have its course, you're also hurting yourself psychologically. What we see with people with gambling problems is a growing sense of depression, anxiety, um, uh, loss, kind of lost in themselves. And that sometimes elevates to a level in which people start thinking about hurting themselves, which they otherwise wouldn't maybe have considered. So those psychological pains start growing, as does the debt grow and the harm to others. And then finally, we all know that psychological distress closely related to physical harm. That may be further down the road, but that ongoing distress and trying to deal and adjust with it with all the other distress that you have in your life will have an effect on your body as well. It's one of the things that we also see with people who are struggling because of their gambling is that it hurts their performances in their life, hurts their ability to be a good partner, but it also hurts for those who are trying to get some academic achievement. It's hurting their school performance. We know that college students who are gambling are more likely to drop out of classes and to contemplate, if not drop out of school. Again, interfering with their ability to achieve an income and stability in their life. And that also happens with people in the workplace where gambling takes over their life. It drives what they're doing and they start performing less well, if not, and we've seen this many times, of people who place their job at risk. Sometimes that risk is that they don't do their job. Sometimes their risk is they take their job or their business as a way of getting cash to go gamble. But those harms are to themselves, to those around them, but also to their functional and sort of occupational well-being. So one of the things that's important to realize is that harm to your relationship with others can also lead to a harm to those others. We have very good data to show that a person who's who's struggling because of their gambling hurts on average 6 to 7 other people in their life. That harm to them hurts them. With children, economic deterioration of a home has a great significant impact on children's development and well-being. The harm to those closest to you, your partner, your parents, can be such that not only do they lose trust in you and in them, but they also deteriorate how they think about the world. I mean, for a parent to say, "What did I do wrong?" For a partner to struggle with, like, "What do I do next? Should I lock away all our money? Have I done the wrong thing? Did I okay this or not pay attention in ways?" And so they start existentially asking themselves if they're doing the right thing in life. If not, panicking about what am I going to do next? How do I make repairs? How do I move forward? They can become depressed and anxious and really deteriorate their life as well.
How does gambling disorder compare to other addictions, like addictions to alcohol or other substances?
Yeah, so it has some similarities and differences, and it's because of the similarities that we can place gambling, which is the first sort of recognized behavioral addiction, an addiction without a substance, but it places it very squarely in the space of addiction. And those similarities are both biological and psychological. So the way in which the brain and the body responds to the risk-taking, to the engagement in the behavior, to the response to the outcome of the behavior, how the reward and emotion control centers of our brain react is very similar when someone's gambling to when they're engaging in substance consumption. It's different because of its nature. One, not having a substance. But in addition to that, it's different because of its role in people's lives and its meaning in people's lives. So, for example, no one begins on a drinking binge believing that at the end of it, that all their problems are going to be solved. By contrast, people start gambling, and almost always they're thinking about and hoping for that one big win, which, if big enough, could possibly solve all their problems. So there's this hope and ambition that comes with gambling that you don't find with other substances, which is why we place it within an addiction, but still see it and need to understand it as being different than substance use addictions.
I'm realizing that gambling disorder may be able to happen almost invisibly in a way that alcohol or substance use disorder is unlikely to.
Yeah, it's a lot less apparent. When somebody's impaired, people around them get that they're impaired. Somebody may be gambling and gambling a lot and experiencing harm, and it may not be apparent to those around them. Watch people when you're in any sort of social setting, and you'll see there are people constantly pulling out their phone to look at something. They could be checking Instagram, or they could be placing a bet. It looks really different. It's easier to mask.
If a person is concerned about their own gambling or another person's gambling, are there screenings available?
Yeah, there are, and fortunately, we have some really scientifically driven measures that can give us very helpful information. I'm a big fan of screeners, and we do it in our life. We get concerned, am I gaining weight? We step on a scale. It's because oftentimes we're not even aware we're really gaining weight, or how, is this too much or not enough? We step on a scale, it tells us what we weigh. We can make a good decision what we want to do from there. And when it comes to gambling, there are several good ones out there. Let me mention two of them. One I really recommend is quick and easy. It's the brief biosocial gambling screen. It's 3 items, and it's mostly asking about difficulties with the gambling, secrecy and harm to families or others, and a question about your finances. Also on our website, and it's there for anybody to use for free to step on that scale. Go to our website, thegamblingclinic.com. You can click that button that says screener, and it'll take you to a brief screener that will give you feedback on, are you good? Or maybe you should be a little worried, or even, hey, maybe you want to reach out for help. So it'll give you a number, and it'll tell you what that number means. It's just a short set of items, and you can do it within 5 minutes. It's kind of like stepping on the scale and just getting that information.
If a screener indicates that a person may have a gambling problem, or if they just know they're experiencing harm from their gambling, what help or treatment is available?
Yeah, so what we know from the literature, and this is the research that we've done here in our team, has really demonstrated that getting help, particularly getting individual therapy that is focused on the gambling, can really improve people's lives. It can reduce their gambling symptoms. It'll go along with decreases in frequency and intensity of gambling. Interestingly, we also know that it'll decrease the experience of depression and anxiety and improve well-being. So we know getting that help works. There are things about gambling that are different than other addictions, and a professional that you might reach out to knowing that matters. And if people in Tennessee are looking for support, we offer treatment at one of our treatment centers or through telehealth. It is something where cost should never be an issue for anyone. We are supported by the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, and anybody can reach out to us and receive this treatment for free.
Thank you for sharing your insights about gambling and gambling problems and the treatment of gambling problems.
Yeah, thanks for your great questions.